This is a presentation about creative problem solving. This presentation will tell you when to use creative problem solving, with which students it might prove useful, and it will give you information about the process generally as it unfolds. So let's start with the first question about when would you use the approach. I think it's probably fair to say that this approach is best used when you want to be successful with a challenging student but you don't quite know how. You want to do well for the student but you feel stuck. You might say that the goodwill is still there in the school but the plan isn't. And it is important that the goodwill is still there, because no plan on earth, no matter how good it is, will help the student or help the school if there's still not that intention to keep the student in the school, to keep the student included. So when you feel that you've tried all the normal strategies, all the logical strategies that the school has to offer, this approach might help. So there's a bit of a rationale behind this approach to creative problem solving. And it goes something like this. The first part of the rationale is that the majority of students with behaviour problems will respond well to well-ordered, well-tested set of strategies, well-proven. For the vast majority of students that we work with in our schools, the sensible, logical approach will be successful. And those will be strategies such as individual programs, additional in-class support, mentoring programs of various kinds, access to different kinds of skills development programs and adapted work programs, all those kind of things that we know very well, and as I said, for the majority of students work well. But for a small minority of students, these very sensible, very logical, very practical strategies aren't successful. So these students will have accessed a wide variety of additional support programs, but we find that their behaviour is not improved or not sufficiently improved. Now, in some cases, this is the result of the strategies not being properly applied. An individual program, for instance, may have been unsuccessful because the targets were inappropriate or the motivators weren't relevant to the individual program. The program wasn't supported properly by the adults in the school, and so on. A whole range of perfectly understandable reasons why programs haven't worked. In other cases, it might be that it was the right strategy but somehow just applied at the wrong time. Now, in these cases, and it's important probably to stress this, these strategies will usually need to be revisited. They're basically the right strategies, they just need more time and attention to get them to be successful. But for a small minority of students in our classes, the strategy will be been applied successfully. They just didn't work. We need to think differently for these students. So thinking in other terms might mean that the analysis of or construction upon the students' problems and hence the program resulting for this construction were flawed. It might mean, for example, that the students' problems were thought to be so serious that there was no true alternative approach that could exist for that student. Or that the student, understanding the attempts adults were making to modify their behaviour, somehow deliberately sabotaged the strategy. There are many reasons why supposedly sensible strategies fail. When we've literally tried all we know, then we need to think differently. So what we're suggesting here is that we need to look at the problem in a different light, as you might say. In simple terms, those students whose behaviour remains challenging despite having accessed any number of appropriate strategies, they need those involved with offering support to be capable of generating new and different ideas. I say to think outside the box as it's been described. And the following problem-solving model supports this intention. So, the creative problem-solving model, as it's been called here. Now, problem-solving models are well recognised as processes through which a person or persons brainstorm, mind shower new ideas. And the model that we're describing here has a number of differences from these models. For example, there's significantly less problem talk, examination of the problem. The notion that the more that's known about a problem, the better solution does not underpin this model. And there's more emphasis on creating new ideas rather than finding what you might call the right answer. The thinking is that for these children there often isn't a right answer. So the concept here is that too much information about the problem kills rather than enhances creativity. So group members in this model are encouraged to listen imaginatively rather than analytically. A significant emphasis is placed in the model on asking the kind of questions that stand a good chance of generating new ideas. Other differences in this model will emerge as the process unfolds, as this presentation unfolds. Let's just take a moment and look at the theoretical underpinning that supports this model. So the model's based on a creative amalgamation of a number of different psychological paradigms and problem-solving techniques. For example, the work of Steve DeShazer and Michael Durant in the area of solution-focused or brief therapy. Perhaps a somewhat lesser known approach called synectics, based originally on the work of William Gordon. There are aspects of motivational theory from Rudolf Dreikurs and Alfred Adler. And there are aspects of behavioural approaches from B.F. Skinner and many others over the years. And then finally, there are bits of cognitive behavioural strategies from the work of people like Donald Meichenbaum, and again, many other educationalists and professionals over the years. Okay, so that gives you a bit of an idea about the theoretical underpinnings. Let's look at some of the more practical aspects of the model. And perhaps the first thing to say about this particular creative problem-solving model is that it's a team approach. So it uses a team approach to support a creative and synergistic problem-solving process. And in the version of the model presented here, the team would actually meet on a regular basis, perhaps once a month, addressing one challenging student at a time. And slide 32 gives us more information about this strategy. I'll come back to that later on. In some cases, it might be the team would only meet once to address a specific individual student. But the team would be the same regardless of whether it was a one-off meeting or whether it was a series of ongoing meetings. And the team would be made up of somewhere around about 6 or 7 people. That would probably be about an ideal number. Any less than that, you reduce the kind of opportunity for people to have ideas rubbing up against each other's ideas. And particular model this is like a bloody TV thing. Okay, well you stop.
Sorry.
All right. Okay, so now we know a bit about the theoretical underpinning of the model. Let's look at the practicalities of it. And the first practicality, the first thing to say about this particular creative solving model is it's a team approach. So it uses a team of people to support a creative and synergistic problem solving process. Now, in the version of the model presented here, the team would meet on a regular basis, perhaps once a month, to address one individual challenging student at a time. And later in the presentation, there's more information about how this model might actually work. In other cases, the team would be constituted just to address the difficulties of a specific, particularly challenging individual student in the school. The team is made up of approximately 6 or 7 people. Probably any less than that, and you run a bit of a risk of losing the kind of synergy that a number of people grouped together can provide. Any more than that, and it can restrict the creativity. It can be a bit inhibiting for the members of the group if the group is too big. So let's assume a team of around about 6 or 7 people. That team then is made up of 3 subsets of a group. And the first person in this group is what's called either the process leader or the chairperson in more typical meeting parlance. The second person is the problem owner or the problem presenter and the solutions implementer. And then the remaining 4 or 5 people are what we've called the resources or ideas generators. So let's look through these people in a bit more detail. Let's look at what they bring to this process and what their roles are. So let's look first of all at what we'll call the process leader. That's what Synectics calls this person, so we'll use that term as well. So the process leader, or group leader, or chairperson, as I've said in a more traditional setting, they need the following kind of skills. Many of these you'll recognise as being the traditional skills of anybody leading a group or a meeting. So they'll need things like when to pursue an idea and when to move on, when to add what we might call a wacky spin to an idea that's been presented, so that would develop the idea into a perhaps more creative option. When to keep to the structure of the questions that you are offered later in this presentation, or when to diverge from these maybe because you're following a particular line of thought. Which questions to ask anyway. There are quite a lot of questions presented. All the options are presented at the end, so the process leader will need to be able to decide, well, we'll miss out on that one or we'll put that one in at this point. When to use the more creative approaches, such as what we called later on excursions. How to maintain the momentum of the meeting without cutting people short, without them feeling devalued because the process leader has moved on to another idea. How to keep an imaginative, fun, even humorous focus. And this will sound a bit odd to some people, but a serious problem does not need a serious approach. Big problems are not usually solved with big solutions. If you're thinking in terms of creativity, then there needs to be